I did not come here to win a bronze medal. Reportedly a quote from Aljona Savchenko. Join me today as I dive into Aljona Savchenko's tenacity, determination, just everything about a human being that was so determined to win gold that they went to 5 different trips to the Olympics with 3 different partners. But I want to give some cautionary statements first, though. A lot of this material that I'll be talking about and referencing has been translated either 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. So there is a possibility that some of the messages got lost in translation. Also know that there may be some cultural factors that I am somehow missing or not considering as someone from America. Also note that I listened to her name pronounced by several different people, so I apologize if I ended up sticking with the incorrect pronunciation of her name. Keeping all this in mind, join me on this deep dive rabbit hole of mine. However, first, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more figure skating related content. Aljona Savchenko is a Ukrainian-born figure skater who retired competing on behalf of Germany. She is well known for her drive, determination, and unstoppable desire to win. She is the 2018 pairs gold medalist with Bruno and the 2010 and 2014 bronze Olympic medalist with Robin. Her coaches describe her as a conscientious, passionate, driven skater, though her former partners have pretty much less complimentary things to say about her, which we'll get into in a little bit. First, let's get into her backstory, some history, because if we want to know why someone is the way they are, let's see if this is like her baseline. So bear with me. I've heard many different ages of when she started. So here's what I think is correct. So she first started skating at around the age of 3, and there are different reports. Some say that she wanted to skate after watching a figure skating competition on TV, and other reports note that she saw a figure skating poster. Regardless, at one point, she turned to her dad and said she wanted to be like that. And so she first learned to skate on a frozen lake with her father. And in her book, The Long Road to Gold, she mentions her father on that lake taught her to practice, practice, practice in order to do something. She stated that at a very young age, she decided she wanted to be the best figure skater in the world. She watched competitions and constantly wanted to be a part of it and had this unstoppable drive for winning. She knew from the day her dad gave her her first pair of skates that she definitely wanted to be the best. At the age of 4, she begged her parents to train in Kyiv. And at first, they didn't want to do that because of finances and the strain. So they made her just practice more and more and more on the lake or pond. Eventually, though, she convinced her parents to let her pursue training in Kyiv. She had to travel more than 2 hours each day just to train. She would have to wake up at 4 a.m. to catch the bus. In her book, now bear with me because this was a summarized, translated description of what she wrote about her childhood that I reviewed, but she absolutely adored training as a kid and of course as an adult, but she specifically wrote about how she enjoyed training as a kid. When it came to her skating skills, she knew that she wanted to be just as good as her coach. And throughout childhood, her friends, they did not understand her love of skating. She declined playing with them and going for walks, and she felt like she would not be able to explain to them just not only her motivation, but also just how skating felt in general. She loved training so much that she skipped school to practice skating. In fact, one day her mother came home, and so she hid in the closet so that she could trick her mother into thinking she was at school. And she made sure to say she did not want to skip school because she was lazy. She just wanted to skip so she could have more time to train. But what is amusing is she only had to go to school for at least 1 hour. Then she was able to train, but she really wanted that extra hour to practice. In fact, she was never tired after training, and she would have added another hour, but her trainers, would have to stop her. And in fact, at one point, one of her coaches said, "Do you ever get tired?" And she's like, "Of ice? Never." Another interesting thing to note is thinking about her childhood a bit. As when she was 9 years old, her father used to give her kerosene to try to clean her blood. I don't know if that's cultural or not. And so she initially, of course, was training as a single skater. And then she noted in her book that she used to watch pairs skate by, like after she was training. She enjoyed watching it. And then I've read different ages from age either 11 or 13. She decided to go into pairs. What she said was, "I saw the other skaters doing it and I wanted to do it myself. I liked all the acrobatic things like lifts and twists and throws." I did read somewhere that she was initially reluctant to do pairs because she didn't want to rely on a partner because his mistake is her mistake too. And so by the age of 15, I believe it was 15, she was living by herself in an apartment. And the book really lays out, I think it was either her 15th or 16th birthday. She was living on her own, went to go get a salad, and then it discusses how she did not want or even dream about getting cake or ice cream on her birthday because she felt it would be irresponsible because her partner needed to lift her. There was also a discussion about, though, how she really wasn't allowed to eat much. She would have to sneak out bread because skaters were weighed 3 times a day. And probably one of the most fascinating parts of the book that was summarized is she at one point was on this diet that her father encouraged her to do. It'd be like 1 week where there's apple juice only for a week, kefir only for another week, and then olive oil and lemon juice only for another. So this diet, though, apparently made her incredibly sick. And this was the fascinating part. So she was like vomiting on the bathroom floor. But then, like, while vomiting, she began smiling as she thought about how she won the Junior World Championships. So just kind of getting that backstory, it seems like, of course, this was very cultural, ingrained into her. But it also seems like there was a lot of factors when it comes to like her family. But it also seems like she just was very driven also, which I'm sure like all these factors together encompasses that. But it's just interesting to see just how much, or hear about like just how driven she was at such a young age. Aljona began her competitive career representing Ukraine. Her first partner, I couldn't find a whole lot of information about. Her second one, Morozov, is one that she did appear to be more successful with than the first one. They won the 2000 World Junior Figure Skating Championships, and they also secured 2 Ukrainian national titles. They also placed in 15th place at the Salt Lake City Winter Olympics, and this was actually her first Olympics. They apparently had a lot of errors in the program. It seems like in the short program, their first throw was just completely off. And it seems like later on when she went home, she said, "Okay, I go home and change everything. I want to change my life. I felt much power in me, much more potential. I wanted to not be here, not in Ukraine. I needed to change completely." I did read in an article where she said Morozov was not working hard enough and that she felt like she could not be at the top while working with him. And they ended up dissolving their partnership because of his health concerns. And because she did not feel supported with Ukraine, she sought to find a different country to represent. And around that time, she had mentioned to a German journalist that she was looking for a different partner. And that is how she ended up with Robin Szolkowy. When this pair got together, there were a lot of discussions about how Aljona had to adapt to skating with him because of different skating skills. Now, in an interview with their coach, Ingo, at the time, he said it wasn't true, that they were maybe just taught some basic things differently. However, there was also report that Robin was too slow for her, but apparently this problem didn't last that long. And also, Ingo said that there cannot be 2 equals in a pair. And there was a lot of discussion about how it'd be interesting to have a female leader. And what's funny is at the time, I think this article was around 2011, either that or this is when it was archived. He said something like, "Aljona has a good character. The main thing is to not stand in her way when she goes for a goal." Something also interesting about this pair in general throughout the years is, according to Robin in a documentary, He felt that the German Federation did not support them because he did not present about what would be considered a typical German person, and because of her, and again, this was something translated, but he said because of like her broken German and stuff with their coach drama. And what was interesting is the German Federation did not get behind the fact she wanted to train all the time and she'd want to skip out on galas. So it seems like she didn't see the utility of galas because she just wanted to train, train, train. And in fact, in some of his documentaries, someone referred to her as downright bitchy at times, absolutely eaten by her own ambition when talking about kind of just the working conditions of her with her coach and Robin throughout the years. Their former coach, Ingo, was involved in some form of collusion. It seemed like that he spied on other athletes. And I don't know if it just got discovered in 2006 or if this is something that had happened a while back. But they were at risk for not getting to go to the 2006 Olympics. And there were issues to where they were not receiving funding from Germany because he was their coach. And so they really stood by his side. And at one point, Ileana said, I came to Germany for Ingo and Robin. I'm grateful for what we've built. Why should I abandon the best coach we've ever had? And there was actually a documentary about them that, and keep in mind, this could be like a translation error, but it talked about how they may have dated and there was some tension that would sometimes interfere with their training. So if there was tension among the two of them, then they would kind of have it play out on the ice. I can't find a whole lot of information about them dating, so it's pretty interesting. And so they completely had to pay him themselves. Now, it does seem like part of their reason, maybe other than possible dating, of them sticking with him does have a lot to do with her personality because she didn't want to get rid of him because of all the medals that they were getting. So they will go on to later fire him as a coach. Apparently, reportedly, Ileana just kind of looked at him and said, you are no longer our coach. And there was also some discussion about how it had something to do with the fact that Germany was not paying for him, but also they were apparently skating with him for free, or maybe they could. They did, though, ultimately get to go to the Olympics in 2006. And they ended up finishing in 6th place. And she reported that their energy was just not in the right place at the moment. It was mistake after mistake. The pair ended up earning a bronze in the 2010 Olympics, which they had a lot of errors, a lot of small errors in their program. And it's interesting because in an interview about that performance and their time at the Olympics, Robin had said that Ileana blamed him. And he said, of course, for how their performance went, and said that oftentimes the blame is put on him for even things that he is not responsible for. But one person must be blamed in this situation, and he said that was the price that he paid for being successful. Something that is interesting about kind of the dynamics of this pair and probably future pairs as well is you can see kind of some snippets here and there throughout the years that really shows that she does blame or get upset with her partner or partners based upon how they do. But she also seems to be unhappy with her performance as well. And so when talking about the latter, in the 2010-2011 season at the beginning of it, in an interview, someone had asked her, you don't ever really seem very happy on the ice or during your press conferences despite your victories. And she said something along the line of, I can really only smile if everything is perfect. I'm a perfectionist. There's always something in our programs that we can improve. And at the 2011 Europeans, she had made a mistake with a spin and it resulted in 0 points. But they ended up winning regardless. So apparently she seemed real tense and motionless while waiting for the score, but then let out a scream and hugged her partner. So it does look like at least there is some excitement when she wins. In terms of her blaming her partner for the mistakes or not hiding her displeasure, there are some instances throughout the years that kind of stood out to me. For the 2012 Worlds, they were first in the short program, but then in the free program, he forgot one of the pair's combination spins, and so they only got a level 1. And also, he singled a planned double axel. And so when they were waiting for their scores, apparently they had actually tied for the free program with the Russians. And then for a few seconds, it was unclear who was going to be the champions. And then when the final sum came up, she apparently stared at it in complete disbelief, shook her head, and then pretended to shoot someone with an imaginary gun and said it was for Robin because he forgot that spin. And apparently he took that criticism in stride. It was okay for him. Just like in the 2014 Olympics when they had to settle for a bronze medal, she was apparently very quick to blame him for the disappointing results. So it is interesting to note that they really worked hard on upping their technical content throughout several of the years. There are lots of articles kind of on the Wayback Machine of how they mastered so many triple throws. They were doing the triple axel throw at one point, trying the quad throw. And so absolutely they were trying to kind of one up their technical abilities. And so I guess it would make sense for them to make mistakes, but she was not having it. And another theme I saw with this pair is times where she was incredibly ill or injured and they still skated. Like in 2012 Skate Canada, she was battling a cold and she did not think she would be able to skate. However, she was so motivated and wanting to compete that she ended up pushing through it, and she was proud of herself for doing so. And of course, then thinking about the 2014 Sochi Olympics where they won bronze again. And so they both made errors in their program. What's interesting now, I found this in an article, so I don't know exactly if it was from Robin's side, but it said in response to them winning the bronze, it said that Aljona was distraught and blamed her partner for the disappointing result, and then they quickly announced the end of their joint career. And what I do know is Robin, announced that he did not want to compete anymore, and that Aljona, she announced that she did not want to quit competing. She knew that this was not her last, and she did not want to finish, had more energy, and then went on to look for a new partner. Overall, there's lots of things online to talk about, like in Reddit or message boards and forums, about how Robin was unhappy with her and has a lot of comments to say about their training together. I, of course, wanted to look for verified comments, but do know there are a lot of things out there that do reference some of his opinions in time. I do know just from, the documentary pieces of it that I watched that you can tell that he felt like she was intense while training and that she did tend to blame him for things, but I don't want to go too deep into what I read online without being able to see it like tagged in at least an article, but there's stuff out there. In 2014, she was already thinking ahead of how she wanted to go to the 2018 Olympics. And so she partnered up with Bruno and she was quoted saying, "I want Olympic gold in 2018 and I'll achieve that with Bruno." I'm very happy that I was able to, it says, win him as my partner. I don't know if there was a contest or if that's just a translation thing going on here. And so when they initially got together, it seemed like there were a lot of comments about, like, once again, here's a mismatched pair where she, is seen as maybe more successful. And a lot of people also in forums were talking about how, like, she's going to be 34 around the 2018 games. Let's see how this can go. And so when she was interviewed about that, like, hey, you're going to be starting over from scratch, she definitely, said what we would think she would say, like, yes, we're both ready for this and we are hungry to start working. And what's really funny is there was also an interview out where Bruno was asked about and how it was training with her. And he said there was like an initial shock. He said, like, practicing with her is very difficult as practicing with me, actually. I mean, it's always difficult to accept a character of the person next to you. But when you have a dream, you make compromises and then it's fun. And so he talked about how he didn't have the same experiences as her, and he felt like he was far behind her in success, but they worked hard. And so at one point, he was throwing her really high, and like she screamed at one point, and he joked that it was never high enough for her. And so basically in these interviews, he said he had to adapt to, quote, and I'm quoting him, not saying this is what I think, Ukrainian's rigidity in contrast to his French lifestyle. He felt as if he had never trained before working with her. And in another interview, he had said that like she reminded him, as he said that he wouldn't quite describe her. And again, this is translated, so it could be translated funky. He wouldn't quite describe her as a Ukrainian military, but she was focused on the sport like nobody else. Though at one point also in an interview, it said that some felt that maybe he softened her. I've read that at least a couple times. So yeah, similar to her situations with Robin, where she would skate when she maybe wasn't feeling the best. There was a situation at Nebelhorn, I believe it was in 2016, where she competed with both a toothache and a fever. And I think she also at some point may have hurt her back at one point prior to that event. She's also prepping for her coaching license and had this practical exam. And then before another event, she had twisted her ankle. I believe it was Grand Prix France, maybe. It was in like 2016. And she had a botched landing on her throw triple axel. And she knew immediately that she was injured, though she persisted and finished the program. And she said, like, I felt a sharp pain, but I tried to continue the best I could. I just had to. Withdrawing from the free program. So they had to overcome actually those injuries pretty early on in their partnership because they were waiting for him to pretty much get released like through the 2015-2016 season. Now they did make a debut at, this is wild actually. So they made a debut at a Challenger Series in 2015 and then went on to another Challenger Series and then won silver at 2016 Europeans and won the bronze, the 2016 World Championships. To me, it's kind of wild because they had just gotten paired together, waiting for the release. He eventually got released and then boom, boom, boom. So that brings us to the Olympic Games. And keep in mind, her goal was to get a gold. In fact, there was a quote that made me giggle from her that said, "Give me the gold or I'll keep qualifying for the Olympics until I'm 80. And keep in mind also that she kept actually all of her bronze medals throughout the years in her basement. And she did not plan to bring those things out unless she would get the gold. Well, now all of her medals can breathe some air into her life, into her living room or whatever. So with their short program at the Olympics, they ended up placing fourth in the short program after Bruno doubled and intended triple jump. And it is funny because to this day, I still remember the camera panning on as she was saying or asking like, did you double it? Because apparently she did not realize he had doubled it. Like she wasn't 100% sure, but she could tell just from the way he skated, maybe less spirit. But what's interesting also is kind of hearing about how it all went down like afterwards. So Bruno in one interview, like a documentary, talked about how he felt terrible because he doubled it and that she was a very good support for him. And but then he also said he was scared of her reaction because it was the goal of her life. And he did not want her to retire disappointed without winning Olympic gold. There is a quote, however, where she said, I directly asked him, I wanted to be sure if something went wrong. It felt like, what can I do? It's like this. I was so sad. I said to him before we skated, I have experience you want so badly to skate well at the Olympics, but the ice is so different. The rings make you scared. Just skate and do what you do and practice every day. I was sad that he didn't listen to me. And apparently, though, she had already felt like, okay, tomorrow's going to be a new day, meaning the free program. And her husband at the time was like, shouldn't you be sad? And she's like, why should I be sad? Tomorrow is a new day. And so they had a good practice, and it seemed like she was maybe feeling optimistic before the program. They then went on to do probably one of the most mesmerizing free skate programs I've ever seen. Like, I remember being almost speechless, probably was speechless, because it was just so well done. They were so in sync. The lifts were huge, mesmerizing, absolutely adored it. And I will never forget, like, the moment she found out she won gold. And I think Megan Duhamel looked at her and said, I think she said something like, "You effing did it," or something. Like, it was just so cute and adorable. And so she finally got her Olympic dream. Was it enough? Probably not, because she wanted to go back at some point, which I'll get into a little bit. But after the Olympics, they did the Worlds. At age 34, she became the oldest woman to win an Olympic gold medal in figure skating and the first female European figure skater to win gold at all major ISU championships. When asked about the occasions, she said, "I never give up. All my life I've been skating." So, as I mentioned earlier, after the Worlds, which they won, they ended up taking a break initially from competition, but then in 2021, they announced that she and Bruno would not be returning to competition. And more recently, actually it wasn't more recently, gosh, so I'm getting to where like, so at one point, again, this was translated, so keep that in mind. Bruno has some interesting things to say about her. Essentially, the gist of it, he mentioned that although technically they were in sync, they had a very difficult relationship from a psychological perspective. He talked about how it could start with something very simple, but it was almost like hitting each other. So, like, she knew how to poke him or say certain things to make him upset. And he gave an example about how, like, when he was sick as a dog, he would ask to go home and she would call him lazy. And at one point, he ended up in like the ISU for like a bronchitis or a bronchopulmonary infection. And then there was like at one point where like he just couldn't tolerate her anymore. And I don't know if this is a translation error. It said something along the lines of, "One day that was really not going well. She insulted me. She was close to me and I pushed her away. It was like raising my hand on her, which I have always forbidden myself to do. Sometimes you can't take it anymore. You end up saying completely crazy things to yourself, the opposite of what you believe in." And then he describes himself as traumatized and mentioned that he, in 2022, thought that she was going to be at the same competition or she was, and he began to get stressed just thinking about it. And when asked if he would do this again, meaning work with her, if he had to like go back and do it all again, he would not. So that brings us to kind of life after Bruno. So even though they didn't officially retire until like 2021, there were some times where there were like videos released. It was around 2020 of her doing things like a triple axel and a quad jump as well. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I remember seeing it on a harness, but I'm not 100% sure about that. And when she was asked about it in her interview, she said, "I started to learn the triple axel when I was a single skater, but at the age of 13, I switched to pairs and focused on other elements. She always had a dream, though, to jump a triple axel and a quad jump. She likes to do self-improvement." And so really to her, this was just another way of seeing that she's capable and having the strength and desire to do so. So why not? But then shortly after the actual announcement, though, of the retiring, I believe it was like 6 weeks, the German Federation announced that she was going to be released to U.S. figure skating, which was granted. And here's where things just get like a bingo card that you just would not expect. And then it was as if like she was so motivated to go back to the Olympics that she ended up partnering with that fool with the safe sport allegations, TJ Nyman. And like it was announced, it happened, there was like some backlash, and then there was an affair that I never quite could piece all together, and some cameras and all this nonsense. And then it's kind of like, oh, never mind, LOL JK. And then it just didn't happen. So that was like a fascinating, bizarre turn of events. And I do think it put like a cloud over how a lot of people viewed her because although some were trying to say, well, maybe she didn't know this. Maybe this was something that was like a language barrier, something that she didn't quite know. But however, I can't imagine this woman not heavily researching every single human being that she could possibly end up skating with. And I don't know why she would pick him. I mean, surely there could have been somebody else. I mean, I feel like she could just find some rando off the street and like whip him into shape and like make a true like cutting edge type movie. Like, I'm surprised that's not her new motivation in life, is how can I make a real life cutting edge movie? So then I believe her quest to go on to another Olympics may be paused, although she could surprise us. But for now, she is coaching or has been coaching. At one point, the Canariums were with her very briefly. I've read anywhere from like a month to a couple months. And they have actually been pretty diplomatic about their experiences. Now, I've read where people have said they stopped working with her because it was a harsh training environment and that Chris was expected to skate when he wasn't feeling well. But I really tried to find where they've maybe said in an interview. And so I don't know if people have just heard this kind of through the grapevine. What I do know is during an AMA, when it was Brandon Fraser and Alexa Knierim, it was around the 2022 Olympics. And one of the questions was, someone asked what it was like to work with Aljona, and the only response, so keep in mind they did this under NBC Olympics Reddit account, and the only response was LOL. And so, yeah, take what you want from that. So overall, this was like an interesting deep dive. There was at some points though, it was kind of frustrating for me because I wished I had access to more parts of the book because I am getting like kind of more and more fascinated. And I know a lot of it is like the Ukrainian or Slavic training style, but there is just something so interesting about her drive, how like she wants to win. And she has her Olympic gold and like she was wanting to come back, even if it meant like finding a terrible human off the street instead of like any other paraman that she could have found. Cause I'm pretty sure like it wouldn't be hard for her to find someone else. But regardless, like I just feel like we are going to hear that she has unretired and it's going to be like 20 years from now and we're going to be 0% surprised. They'll be like, aha. So hopefully I can do like a part 2 at some point with more information, like maybe from her book and so on. But it was still kind of fun just looking at all the sacrifices she's made throughout her life, her just motivation, all these like fun little quotes. A lot of deep dives. I just wish I had a little bit more information. And hopefully this was interesting, y'all. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more figure skating related content.